Welcome in, everybody, to our deep dive into
Oh.
Kleptopia, How Dirty Money is Conquering the World
Okay, cool.
by Tom Burgis. And
That's good.
we've got excerpts from the book itself.
Okay.
And paired with it, his incredibly detailed endnotes.
Oh, wow.
And I'm already hooked. I mean, this isn't just a thriller.
Right.
It's a meticulously researched expose
Okay.
on how these illicit fortunes
Yeah.
are shaping global power. And,
Yeah.
I can't wait to kind of unpack all of this with you.
What's fascinating to me is how Burgis reveals the mechanics behind kleptocracy.
Right.
It's not just about corrupt leaders. It's about the intricate web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and even seemingly legitimate institutions that prop up this system.
Yeah, it's like he's peeling back layers of an onion, revealing this hidden world where money flows freely across borders, often with little to no oversight.
Oh, wow.
It's almost unbelievable the level of detail he uncovers.
And that's what makes Kleptopia so compelling.
Yeah.
It reads like a detective novel, filled with larger-than-life characters and globe-trotting intrigue.
Oh, yeah.
But it's grounded in solid evidence.
Right.
Drawing on court documents, leaked files, interviews with insiders.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Burgis argues that the collapse of the Soviet Union was a breeding ground for modern kleptocracy. How did that happen?
Oh.
I mean, wasn't this Soviet system supposed to be the opposite of a capitalist free-for-all?
In theory, yes, but imagine a massive empire built on a centralized economy suddenly imploding.
Right.
It created a power vacuum.
Yeah.
And in that chaos, a select few, often those connected to the former regime, were able to seize control of vast assets during privatization.
So it wasn't just about grabbing resources. It was about exploiting the transition itself.
Right, exactly.
Those who understood the system and had the right connections were able to manipulate it to their advantage.
And Burgis uses Kazakhstan as a prime example with Nursultan Nazarbayev, the country's longtime ruler, as the central figure. He details how individuals like the trio, Patok Chodiev, Alexander Mashkovich, and Alazhany Bragimov, were able to accumulate immense wealth during the privatization process, often through questionable means. They essentially became the new elite, replacing the old communist guard.
It's like a changing of the guard.
Right.
But instead of ideology, it's all about personal enrichment. But how do these newly minted oligarchs hold on to power once they've amassed these fortunes? It's not just about having money. It's about wielding influence, right?
Absolutely. They develop a system of control, often using a combination of tactics. Burgis explains how they manipulate the media to control the narrative, suppress dissent by silencing journalists and critics, and even strategically use violence to intimidate opponents. It's a chilling reminder that kleptocracy is not just about financial gain. It's about maintaining power at all costs.
The Zanauzan massacre, where Kazakh security forces fired on striking oil workers, is a horrifying example of that.
Yeah. A stark reminder that behind the financial schemes and corporate maneuvering, there are real people's lives at stake.
And what's especially disturbing is how the regime attempted to control the narrative surrounding the massacre, using PR firms to downplay the violence and shift blame onto the victims.
This story really highlights the danger of unchecked power.
And the length to which kleptocratic regimes will go to protect their interests.
It also raises questions about the role of Western institutions and businesses in propping up these regimes. I mean, if these oligarchs have no legitimate way to spend or invest their wealth, the system collapses, right?
That's where places like the City of London come into play.
It seems counterintuitive.
The image of the city with its tradition and supposed respect for the rule of law, being a haven for dirty money, right? It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. But how does this actually work? I mean, surely there are laws against money laundering, right?
There are.
Okay.
But Burgis exposes the loopholes and regulatory gaps that make the city attractive to those seeking to hide wealth.
Right.
For example, he details how private banks like BSI, operating within the city but bound by Swiss banking secrecy laws, facilitated money laundering and tax evasion for their clients.
So we're not just talking about shady backroom deals.
Right.
We're talking about sophisticated financial maneuvers that involve lawyers, accountants, and even seemingly reputable institutions. It's almost like a parallel financial system.
Exactly.
Operating alongside the legitimate one.
And the case of Frank Temis, a Romanian businessman with a checkered past, is a prime example. Burgis describes how a BSI banker was eager to set up a complex offshore structure. For Temis, seemingly more interested in his connections than his previous convictions. This highlights the moral flexibility or even blindness that allows kleptocracy to thrive.
It's as if the system itself becomes complicit, turning a blind eye to the origins of wealth, as long as it keeps flowing. And Burgis doesn't let regulatory bodies off the hook either. He exposes the failures of institutions like the Financial Services Authority, who were often slow to react, even when presented with clear evidence of wrongdoing.
It's almost like a constant game of cat and mouse, with the launderers always one step ahead.
And as globalization and technology have advanced, so too have the methods of money laundering. Burgis explains how these techniques have evolved from relatively simple schemes to incredibly complex operations involving layers upon layers of shell companies, offshore accounts, and even investments in real estate. It's mind-boggling how sophisticated it's become.
It's almost like trying to track a phantom through a maze. But could you give us an example of how this works in the real world, something that makes it more concrete for our listeners?
Sure. One striking example is the story of the Tri-County Mall in Ohio. A rather unremarkable shopping mall that was acquired using funds allegedly linked to Ilyas Karpunov, the son-in-law of a prominent Kazakh opposition figure. The mall itself was described as a legit shithole by one employee. But it served as a vehicle for moving and potentially cleaning dirty money. So it's not just about yachts and private jets. It's about seemingly mundane assets that can be used to launder money. It's happening right under our noses, hidden in plain sight. This brings up a question for me. If these kleptocrats are so good at hiding their money, how does anyone even know what's going on? I mean, it seems like an impossible task to track all of this.
It is incredibly difficult. But there are people working tirelessly to expose these systems. And one of the key battlegrounds, as Burgis describes it, is information. Kleptocrats understand that their power relies not just on controlling assets, but also on controlling the narrative. They wage a constant battle to shape public perception, often employing PR firms, lawyers, and even journalists to sanitize their image and discredit their opponents.
It's like a public relations war where the truth becomes a casualty, and you see this play out in some truly chilling examples, like the FSB's attempt to frame John Loff, a British businessman working for the oil giant TNK-BP, as a spy.
The Loff incident is a classic example of how kleptocratic regimes use disinformation and fabricated evidence to silence those who threaten their interests. They understand the power of information and will go to great lengths to control it. And the techniques they employ can be quite sophisticated.
So it's not just about brute force or censorship. It's about manipulating the media, using legal systems to their advantage, and even engaging in character assassination. It's a multi-pronged approach to silencing dissent and maintaining control.
And another fascinating example is the case of Mukhtar Ablyazov, a Kazakh oligarch who fell out with Nazarbayev and became a vocal critic. He was accused of embezzling billions from BTA Bank and was forced into exile.
Right.
He claims he was playing by the rules of the Kazakh system, where holding assets through a network of nominees and offshore entities was common practice.
So he's arguing that what he was doing was essentially how business was conducted in Kazakhstan. Yeah. But when he tried to apply that same logic in a Western court, it backfired.
He found himself judged by a different set of rules, those of Western legal systems that prioritize transparency and accountability.
And his case highlights how legal systems can be manipulated by those with power and resources. It also raises questions about the fairness and consistency of international legal systems doesn't it?
Yeah.
If someone can be deemed a criminal in one jurisdiction and a victim of persecution in another, it creates a sense of uncertainty and undermines trust in the rule of law.
Absolutely. And Ablyazov's story took a particularly dark turn when his wife and daughter were apprehended in Italy and forcibly returned to Kazakhstan.
Okay.
This event raised concerns about the misuse of international law enforcement cooperation and highlighted the lengths to which those in power would go to silence their opponents.
It's terrifying to think that someone could be snatched off the streets of a European city and sent back to a country where they face potential persecution.
Right.
It underscores the global reach of these kleptocratic regimes and their ability to manipulate legal systems to their advantage.
And this is precisely what makes Kleptopia such a compelling read.
Yeah.
It's not just about abstract financial concepts or geopolitical maneuvering.
Right.
Burgis consistently brings the story back to the human level, reminding us that there are real people caught in the crossfire of these power struggles.
It's a reminder that the fight against kleptocracy is not just about protecting assets or upholding legal principles. It's about protecting people's lives, their freedoms, and their basic human rights.
And it's about recognizing that these issues
are not confined to far-off countries. They're increasingly affecting Western democracies as well.
Right. And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll delve into the connections between kleptocracy and the West. Focusing on the role of individuals like Donald Trump and the implications for democratic norms and institutions.
It's a conversation that's both unsettling and essential. Stay tuned as we continue our journey through the shadowy world of Kleptopia.
Feels good.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
Perfect.
Well, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up part one here. So we'll be back with part two shortly.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Perfect.
We've been talking about how kleptocrats control information, but one event really blew the lid off the whole system. The Panama Papers.
Oh, wow.
It's like a Pandora's box of financial secrets, revealing the extent of offshore havens and the lengths people go to hide their wealth.
What's remarkable about the Panama Papers is that it wasn't just about one country or a handful of individuals. It exposed a vast global network of individuals and institutions, from politicians to celebrities, all using these complex offshore structures to shield their wealth from scrutiny.
And the fallout was huge, right?
Yeah.
Didn't it lead to resignations, investigations, and even some prosecutions?
Right.
It seems like a rare example of accountability.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
One of the most prominent figures whose downfall was directly linked to the Panama Papers was Najib Razak, the former prime minister of Malaysia. Burgis highlights how the leak exposed his involvement in the 1MDB scandal, a multi-billion-dollar corruption scheme that ultimately led to his conviction.
The 1MDB case is almost like a textbook example of how dirty money can flow across borders involving shell companies, shady investments, and complicit individuals from all walks of life.
It shows that even though the system is incredibly complex and often shrouded in secrecy, there are times when justice prevails.
While the Panama Papers was a major victory for transparency, Kleptopia reminds us that the fight is far from over. In fact, the book paints a rather bleak picture of a world where dirty money has become deeply embedded in the global system, and those involved often operate with a sense of impunity. That's what makes the story of Nigel Wilkins so fascinating. And frankly, a little heartbreaking. Here's a guy, a compliance officer at BSI London, right at the heart of this web of financial secrecy, who tries to do the right thing and ends up paying a heavy price.
Wilkins' journey from idealistic economist to disillusioned whistleblower is a recurring theme in Kleptopia. And it really highlights the personal risks involved in challenging this system.
So he diligently compiles evidence. Boxes and boxes of it. Meticulously documenting the shady dealings he witnesses at BSI.
I can almost picture him poring over documents late into the night. Those top secret red boxes stacked in his flat, knowing he's uncovered something huge but feeling powerless to stop it.
It's like David versus Goliath. Only David is armed with spreadsheets and financial statements instead of a slingshot.
And sadly, the system seems more interested in protecting itself than in heeding his warnings.
Even when he later finds employment at the Financial Services Authority, the very agency tasked with regulating the financial industry. He faces resistance.
It's almost Kafkaesque, isn't it? He goes to the authorities with clear evidence of wrongdoing, and they end up investigating him instead.
It makes you wonder if someone like Wilkins, with his knowledge and access, can't get the system to respond. What hope is there for holding these powerful actors accountable?
That's a question that hangs over the entire book. And it's not just about regulations or legal loopholes. Burgis reminds us that kleptocratic regimes often resort to more direct methods of silencing critics. Violence and intimidation are tools of the trade.
The story of Rosa Tulatayeva, the oil worker from Zanozin, is a chilling example. She speaks out against corruption, demands better working conditions for herself and her fellow workers, and they're met with brutal repression. The Zanozin massacre is a stark reminder of the human cost of kleptocracy. How these financial schemes have real-world consequences for ordinary people.
Tulatayeva's courage in the face of such adversity is truly inspiring. It highlights the fact that even in the most oppressive environments, there are individuals who refuse to be silenced. Their stories are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a reminder that the fight against kleptocracy is ultimately a fight for human dignity and justice.
It's also a reminder that kleptocracy is not just a problem over there in far-off countries. It can utilize the legal systems of Western democracies to pursue its aims, as we see in the case of Mukhtar Ablyazov, the exiled Kazakh oligarch.
His story illustrates how legal battles can become proxy wars, with kleptocratic regimes using vast resources to pursue their opponents across international borders. In Ablyazov's case, BTA Bank, now under the control of the Kazakh government, pursued him relentlessly through courts in the UK and elsewhere, accusing him of embezzling billions.
And it all gets very murky, right? Ablyazov maintains he was a victim of political persecution, a rival to Nazarbayev being targeted for daring to challenge the regime. But how do you disentangle legitimate legal action from a politically motivated witch hunt?
It's incredibly difficult. And that's part of the challenge in confronting kleptocracy. The lines between legitimate business dealings, political maneuvering, and outright criminal activity become blurred.
And the fact that his wife and daughter were apprehended in Italy and forcibly returned to Kazakhstan adds another layer of complexity. It raises questions about the misuse of extradition treaties and the potential for even democratic countries to be complicit in these kinds of operations.
Absolutely. Ablyazov's story serves as a cautionary tale, illustrating how even seemingly robust legal systems can be manipulated by those with enough power and resources. It highlights the need for vigilance and a critical eye when evaluating these complex cases.
So we've got this tangled web of financial secrecy, political maneuvering, and legal battles.
Yeah.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It does, doesn't it? But Burgis doesn't just leave us feeling overwhelmed and hopeless.
Right.
He also points towards potential solutions, avenues for resistance.
Doesn't he?
One recurring theme is the importance of transparency and accountability.
Okay.
He highlights the vital role of investigative journalism, whistleblower protections, and international cooperation.
Yeah.
In exposing corruption and holding those responsible accountable.
And we've seen some real-world examples of this, right?
Yeah, we have.
The Panama Papers, the conviction of Najib Razak, these cases demonstrate that despite the challenges, progress is possible.
Exactly. And it's not just about relying on institutions and authorities.
Okay.
Burgis emphasizes the role of individuals in civil society in demanding change.
Okay.
He points towards the power of collective action, grassroots activism, and the courage of individuals who dare to speak truth to power.
So it's not just about top-down reform.
Right.
It's about bottom-up pressure as well.
Exactly.
Citizens demanding accountability, journalists shining a light on corruption, whistleblowers risking their careers to expose wrongdoings.
Right.
It's a multifaceted approach that requires courage, persistence, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
And Kleptopia offers a powerful call to action, urging us to recognize the threat posed by dirty money and to work collectively to build a more just and equitable world.
Great.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in this fight, whether it's supporting investigative journalism, advocating for stronger regulations, or simply refusing to accept corruption as the norm.
It's about refusing to be complicit. Even in seemingly small ways, our choices have consequences. Where we put our money, what companies we support, the policies we advocate for. These decisions can either reinforce the system or help dismantle it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we shouldn't underestimate the power of individual action. Even seemingly small acts of resistance can collectively contribute to a larger movement for change.
Right.
It's about shifting the culture, raising awareness, and making it increasingly difficult for these systems of secrecy and corruption to operate with impunity.
Okay, but let's get real for a second.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about corrupt regimes in far-off countries. But Burgis doesn't shy away from examining the role of Western democracies in enabling kleptocracy. How does he bring this closer to home?
Well, he explores how lax regulations in certain jurisdictions, financial secrecy laws, and a willingness to turn a blind eye to the origins of wealth have created an environment that's conducive to illicit finance.
Okay.
Essentially, he argues that the West has in some ways become complicit in this system.
And he doesn't pull any punches when it comes to discussing figures like Donald Trump, He lays out connections between Trump's business empire and individuals and funds linked to kleptocratic regimes, suggesting that this isn't just a problem over there, it's happening right here, right now.
And this raises some uncomfortable questions about the potential normalization of kleptocratic practices in the West.
Okay.
A trend that has profound implications for democracy and the rule of law.
Right.
It's a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Reminding us that we need to be just as vigilant about corruption within our own systems as we are about corruption elsewhere.
So it's not just about pointing fingers at other countries. We have to examine our own systems and structures and ask ourselves, how are we complicit? What can we do to make it more difficult for dirty money to flow through our institutions?
And that's where the call for greater transparency and accountability becomes so crucial. It's about demanding more from our elected officials, financial institutions, and corporations. We have to hold them to a higher standard and refuse to accept corruption as the norm.
But it's not just about laws and regulations, is it?
Yeah, it's about changing the culture of fostering a sense of ethics and responsibility, making it clear that we won't tolerate this kind of behavior.
It's a moral battle as much as it is a legal or financial one.
Okay.
And Kleptopia serves as a powerful reminder that the stakes couldn't be higher.
Right.
The future of democracy,
right,
global stability, and even the planet itself may depend on our ability to effectively counter the insidious spread of dirty money.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground, but I'm still intrigued by this shadowy world of private investigators, spies, and corporate espionage that Burgis delves into.
Right.
It sounds like a real-life spy thriller.
It does, doesn't it?
It does. Burgis takes us inside firms like Diligence, founded by former intelligence operatives, where they're employed to dig up dirt, track down assets, and even manipulate legal proceedings. Information is currency in this world.
Right.
And the line between legitimate investigation and ethically dubious tactics gets very blurred.
And we see this play out in the pursuit of Mukhtar Ablyazov, right?
Specifically.
Private investigators are hired to track his movements, surveil his family, gather evidence to support the accusations against him.
Yeah, it's like something out of a John le Carré novel, but with real-world consequences.
And it raises questions about the accountability and oversight of these private intelligence firms.
Yeah.
If they operate with limited transparency and are accountable primarily to their clients, what safeguards are in place to prevent abuse and overreach?
It's a bit unsettling, isn't it?
It is.
We're talking about powerful entities operating in the shadows with access to sophisticated surveillance techniques, cyber espionage, even psychological manipulation.
Right.
And it's all happening outside the realm of public scrutiny.
It's a reminder that the battle against kleptocracy is being fought on multiple fronts, including this hidden information war that's often waged outside the public eye.
Right.
And it highlights the need for greater transparency and accountability, not just for governments and corporations, but for these private intelligence firms as well.
So we've come full circle back to that fundamental question that runs through Kleptopia. How can we effectively counter this system in a world where power finance and even intelligence gathering are often susceptible to manipulation and exploitation?
It's a daunting challenge, but Kleptopia doesn't leave us without hope.
It doesn't, by shining a light on these practices, by demanding transparency and accountability, by supporting those who are fighting for a more just and equitable world. We can make a difference.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway from this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not about feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the problem. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play.
Exactly.
And that even small acts of resistance can collectively contribute to a larger movement for change.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of those individual stories of courage and resistance and discuss what we can each do to contribute to this fight against kleptocracy.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
As we've been exploring this world of Kleptopia, I keep coming back to the story of Nigel Wilkins.
Yeah.
It's almost Shakespearean. You know, a man who sees the truth, tries to sound the alarm, but is ultimately crushed by the very system he's trying to expose.
There's a real tragedy to his story. Remember, he doesn't just walk away after leaving BSI. He takes a job at the Corporation of London, the heart of the city, believing that change can happen from within.
Yeah, it speaks to his idealism, his faith in institutions.
Yeah.
And all the while, those red boxes filled with evidence are sitting in his flat.
Yeah.
A constant reminder of the secrets he uncovered. He even tries to engage with Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, hoping they'll investigate. It's like he can't let it go. He's driven to expose the truth.
But the system circles the wagons. The Financial Services Authority, where Wilkins eventually ends up working, launches an investigation into him.
Not for the massive financial wrongdoing he's brought to light, but for potential privacy violations.
It's a chilling example of how institutions prioritize self-preservation over justice.
It's like a dark satire, isn't it?
It is.
The watchdog, meant to guard against corruption, ends up biting the hand that's trying to feed it information.
Right. No wonder Wilkins feels like he's banging his head against a wall.
And it speaks to a fundamental challenge in combating kleptocracy.
Right.
These systems thrive on secrecy, on operating in the shadows. Someone like Wilkins, who dares to shine a light on these hidden machinations, becomes a threat that needs to be neutralized.
Right.
And in a way, they succeed.
Yeah.
Wilkins is fired from the FSA. His reputation tarnished. It's a cautionary tale, a reminder of the power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
But there's this one moment in the book that always gets to me.
You're talking about when he shares those red boxes with the journalist?
Wilkins, facing declining health and increasingly isolated, decides to entrust his evidence to someone who might actually use it. It's an act of defiance.
Yeah.
A refusal to let the truth be buried.
It's a powerful moment, a testament to his belief in the power of truth.
Right.
And it underscores a crucial point. Individuals matter.
Yeah.
Even in the face of vast, seemingly impenetrable systems.
Right.
One person who's willing to stand up and speak truth to power can make a difference.
And Kleptopia is full of these stories of individual courage, right? We've talked about Rosa Tuletaeva and the oil workers in Zhanaozen. There are journalists risking their lives to expose corruption.
Right.
It's a reminder that change doesn't always come from the top down. It often starts with ordinary people.
Right.
Refusing to accept the status quo.
Exactly. And as we reflect on what we've learned from this deep dive, it's worth asking ourselves, what can we do?
Right. What can we do?
How can we contribute to this fight for transparency and accountability?
Right. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problem. But what are some concrete steps we can take as individuals to counter the spread of dirty money and the corrosive effects of kleptocracy?
Well, one of the most effective things we can do is support investigative journalism organizations like the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, which was behind the Panama Papers, play a vital role in exposing corruption.
So subscribing to investigative outlets, donating to their work, sharing their stories, that's one way to make a difference.
Absolutely. We can also support organizations that are advocating for stronger regulations and greater transparency in the financial system. Groups like Transparency International and Global Witness are working tirelessly to combat corruption and money laundering.
And I imagine there are local organizations as well.
There are, working on these issues at a community level.
And don't underestimate the power of making informed choices as consumers and citizens. Being aware of where our money goes, who we support with our investments, and the policies we advocate for. All of that can contribute to a more ethical and transparent system.
It's about being mindful of our own complicity, even in seemingly small ways, and recognizing that our choices have consequences.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about demanding accountability from those in power. Whether it's our elected officials, financial institutions, or corporations, we have to hold them to a higher standard and make it clear that we won't tolerate corruption.
So it's a combination of individual action, supporting the right organizations, and holding those in power accountable. It's a multi-pronged approach. And it requires sustained effort.
It does, but Kleptopia reminds us that it's a fight worth having. The stakes are too high to be complacent. The future of democracy, global stability, and even the planet itself are interconnected with this fight against dirty money.
It's a sobering thought, but also a call to action. We can't just sit back and hope someone else will fix it.
We all have a responsibility to be informed, engaged, and active in this fight.
And while the challenges are immense, so too is the potential for change by working together, supporting those on the front lines, and demanding a more just and equitable world. We can chip away at this edifice of kleptocracy and create a system that serves the interests of the many, not just the few.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
One that leaves me feeling both challenged and hopeful.
Right.
And I want to thank you for joining me.
Yeah.
On this deep dive into Kleptopia. It's been a fascinating, albeit disturbing journey.
Yeah.
But I think we've gained a deeper understanding of how this system operates and, more importantly, what we can do to counter it.
It's been a privilege to explore these complex issues with you and to share these insights with our listeners.
Right.
And I hope this deep dive encourages everyone to continue exploring this topic and to consider the implications for their own lives and the future of global society.
Because ultimately, we all have a role to play in shaping that future.
Yeah.
And as we've learned from Kleptopia, the fight against kleptocracy is not a spectator sport.
It's not.
It's a battle that requires our active engagement, our critical thinking, and our unwavering commitment to a better world.
Absolutely.
Let's get to work.
Okay, great.